studies from Cameroon, how we verified some videos that we used for our investigations. And then Jake is going to take over to talk a little bit about a single case in Ethiopia. I must warn you before that the one from Ethiopia, that's one is pretty gruesome. The ones from Cameroon, like the topic is it's not very pleasant, obviously, but it's not as graphic. So I just wanted to warn everyone about that. Okay, so let's start off. One moment. I will also share my audio before I forget. One moment. Yeah, it's already sharing. And for some reason, let me see. Okay, so yeah, there we go. So first I want to talk a little bit about, well, what Bellingcat is, and then also a little bit about Newsy and what they do, right? So first, starting with Bellingcat. So Bellingcat started as a research collective of citizen journalists started by Elliot Higgins, along with other writers for the blog. So some of the first writers were Eric Doller, Peter van Huis, some others, first focusing mostly on Syria and Ukraine related issues, and then expanding slowly to include more regions, as we did now with Africa, right? Bellingcat articles focus on open source information, that can be found online with a focus on transparency of methods that we use in the investigations or in the articles. We explain in great detail how we found out, right? So that's the way we do it usually, right? Then a little bit about Newsy. So my colleague here, Jake Godin, he works for Newsy. It's a national news network based in the US. Newsy plus Bellingcat is an Emmy-nominated series produced by Jake Godin and edited by Jennifer Smart. The reporting is a partnership between Newsy and Bellingcat. The series focuses on using open source materials to investigate various stories, from heavy-handed police response to protests in Colombia. And as today, we will talk about a massacre in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. All right. Okay. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cameroon topic, right? About the investigation we did about Cameroon. Then I have to also introduce you to the Cameroon Anglophone Crisis Database of Atrocities. So it is a database that collects, stores, and verifies information about atrocities perpetrated by all sides during the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon. I will explain a little bit of Anglophone. But first, I'll explain a little bit more about the database of atrocities. So the database is apolitical and nonpartisan and is hosted by the University of Toronto. It aims to counter impunity, to secure evidence for future accountability proceedings, and to deter the warring parties from engaging for atrocities, right? So they are both investigating crimes committed by the separatists as well as the ones committed by the state, right? So as you will see today, most of the cases that we are going to talk about, and as you read through the whole article, if you wish to do so, there is going to be a more focused approach on what the separatists did, but both sides committed a lot of atrocities. I'll explain a little bit more about that later on, all right? So the Anglophone conflict in Cameroon, it helps here to know a little bit the context of Cameroon, why there are Anglophone regions there, and why the majority of the country is Francophone. So Cameroon used to be a German colony that was split by France and Great Britain after World War I. The British territories, they were annexed to what's now Nigeria. After independence, the northern areas remained Nigerian, and the southern areas joined the rest of Francophone Cameroon to form a federal republic. The former British areas have since been losing some of their autonomy, right? So this is a little, map of how it looked like before, or at least here we see Cameroon when it was a German colony. All these territories belonged to Germany officially, right? So it expanded, and after World War I, it split, right, into two areas. Basically, this area here in red became British, and the rest French. So this is what it looked like. After independence, the southern areas joined the rest of Cameroon, whereas these areas here, they stayed with Nigeria. All right, so when we started out with this investigation, we decided we wanted to focus on the school children that are caught in the middle of this conflict, right? So the latest iteration of this Anglophone problem, this conflict, began in 2016 when Anglophone lawyers and teachers held peaceful protests against the government's placement of Francophone judges and teachers in the region's courts and schools. Yeah. So these protests, they were met with a very harsh crackdown by the central government, right? And then separatists started to declare independence in October 2017. When that happened, well, this ongoing conflict really started. That really triggered the ongoing conflict, right? As I said, a lot of atrocities have been committed by the Cameroonian government, right? Fortunately, like here, we aren't going really to focus on that, because we are going to focus really on how this is affecting the school children, right? So here, caught in the middle, children have increasingly become pawns in a political struggle, right? Separatist groups affirm that the Anglophone educational system, as well as their law, strongly differs from the Francophone one, right? The school system is different, as well as like the common law versus the French civil law, right? So some separatist groups oppose school resumption and sometimes violently enforce a school boycott. So yeah, a famous example was last year in Kumba, right? On October 24th, 2020, armed assailants murdered 7 children and left those more injured in Kumba in the Anglophone areas, because they wanted to, pretty much violently enforce this school boycott. So this is something that occurs like a lot. We saw that happening in different areas, although this was probably the bloodiest one, really involving children. Despite of that, there are like several different ways that people disrupt school life in Cameroon, right? So I'm going to show you the next example that involves an arson attack on a school, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, I want to reiterate that the government is no innocent force. They were behind massacres like the Ngarbu massacre, also in the Anglophone areas of Cameroon, where I think 21 people, including 13 children, were killed, right? So they are also a violent force in this conflict, sometimes even more violent, but they usually don't specifically target school children, right? Like schools, because it's in their interest to pretend that normal life is still going on in Cameroon, right? And that nothing is happening there. So they actually want children to resume school, whereas the separatists, they want to enforce either a boycott or encourage people to go to their so-called community schools. I'll talk about community schools later on. First, I wanted to talk about a case that happened in the Nkambe area of the Northwest region. So over here, we see a screenshot, right, from Mimimefo. So that's like a local news organization. So they focus a lot on the Anglophone areas of Cameroon. Here they are saying like Nkambe has the most secured schools in Cameroon's restive northwest region. But hours ago, a private school was torched in Punji, leaving children stranded. Have soldiers and MPs, so it goes on like that, right? So here, feel free to write something, at least if that's possible, in the chat with what you think here can help us verify this video, right? Because what we want to do is see if this video is genuine, right? Probably Mimi Mefo, her news organization, probably already did some checking, right? But when we want to use it, right, use it for our investigation, for our article, we want to be sure and see if we can locate this place ourselves, because locating a place is often the most effective method to determine if a video or a picture is what it's said to be, right? One moment, it's a bit hot in here. All right, so any thoughts what could be interesting for us here when verifying? So it can be any mentions about the place, and it can also be mentions about the location, about the time and the date this took place. All right. So I guess you guys won't be able to communicate with us through the chat, but then what I'll do here, I'm just going over some of the things that we used for verification, right? So here we see a few things, right? It's February 9th that it was posted. Yeah. It says it was in the Nakambe area in the northwest region. So that helps us determine the location. And it says that it happened a few hours ago in Kumbi. So presumably on the 9th of February in around Nakambe in the town called Kungi, right? So what I did, and this is something I like to do a lot, right, is download these administrative boundaries of a country, but also internally, right? Because like usually there are different administrative levels. There's the country, region or state. Then you have all kinds of sub-regions. And it's no different in Cameroon. So what I did, I went to this OCCRP website. It's called Data, right? So they share these shape files that you can download. And then you can like import them to your Google Earth, right? So I believe here everyone, or at least I recommended everyone to download and install Google Earth, and will become clear why in the next few slides, right? So I went here and installed the shapefile. I think I have it open here as well. Let me show you here. So here, this is the website, data.himdata.org. Here you can search for different shapefiles that you can import to your Google Earth program, right? So here we have a shapefile in the zip. I downloaded this already, so I'm not going to download it now. But usually in the title, it's going to say SHP, which means it's a shapefile, right? So once you have it installed or downloaded, you will just unzip it and import it in Google Earth, right? So you go to File, then Import, and you can select the ones that end on .shp, because those are going to be the shape files. So in that instance that I downloaded, in that zip file, I had like these different levels, right? More about those different levels later, but what I was interested in was the one here, right? Like the administrative level 3, that would give me the boundaries of Nakambe, right? Because if you look for them on Google Maps or Google Earth, it will not always show you the exact boundaries. For some countries it will, but unfortunately for Cameroon, that wasn't the case. All right, so what I did, once you import it, it will ask you to create a new template for the color scheme. And then like say, okay, how do you want to select, right? How do you want to sort this? I selected the name of the administrative regions, right? And then I just changed the color, because usually it will cover the whole area. I made what's inside transparent, so I could see what's actually there on the satellite imagery. And then I only marked the lines, the boundaries in red, right? So that it would help me. So here we have Nakambe. So there is this area here, right? This here, Nakambe, right? That's the city or the town. That's also the capital of the same region, right? All right. Then to find Kungi, yeah, if you try to type that into Google Earth, you will probably not find it. At least I didn't back then, nor do I find it now when I try to look for it on Google Earth, right? So that's unfortunately a very common thing that happens a lot in those areas. But yeah, sometimes other sites, for example, here French Wikipedia was of great help because they have the name of the town there, they have a page about it, and they give the coordinates. So I copied those coordinates and then I opened it on, and it shows me a town just right north of Nakambe. All right, so now there is something, yeah, interesting there, I thought, right? Like in the video, we actually see some of the shadows. And you can kind of guess pretty much when things happened. Actually, I should have done this slide after this one, but let's go here. So here we see a panorama that I made of this area, right? I used auto stitch. Maybe we can drop that the name of that tool in the comments, like later on after the presentation, because it's very useful, right? You see very well now how the area looks like, and you see the school is a very long building, right? It could be that it became even more long because of the panorama, but it looks more or less like this. There is a hill behind it, and there is this like tree where I think there are 3 trees just like left here, right, in front of the building. All right, and we see these shadows that are very long. So looking at Sunkalk, so sunkalk.org is a website that lets you check these the position of the sun at any given time, at any given date for a certain location, this location you provide yourself. So I went to Kungi, to that same area, and checked how the sun was for that date, right? I'll just open the site to show it. I think I need to go to the proper date, actually. So it was February 9th. Now you see like the sun, when it approaches like noon, right? The sun comes closer, and that means the shadows will become shorter as well. So that's why we thought, okay, this is either going to be like later in the afternoon or very early in the morning, right? Because as soon as you approach noon, the shadows become really small. So here, for someone who's like 170 meters, right? The shadow would be like so 80 centimeters, right? So that's why we thought that. That was our working assumption. So going back here, right? When we start looking for places, we can already discard a few places, right? Either the camera angle here is looking west or east. So we already discarded, okay, places that have the same positioning north or south. We also made a sketch just to help our minds grasp how the place looks like, right? You have the tree here, a longer building with a hill right behind it, right? And this is kind of the camera angle looking that way. But well, the sketch is nothing like extraordinary. It's just to help you, just to give you an idea. And for this one, it was actually much easier. You didn't really need to sketch, but for some other investigations, for some other geolocations, it might be extremely helpful, right? So looking around the area, there was just one area that really matched. And that was this building over here. Maybe you can see there is like a ridge over here. There is the tree over there, right? And we have this long building. So that seemed to match, right? But that brings us to like the next thing, right? Here we are looking at the positioning of the shadows at, like, for example, in the morning, right? Because this part here, there is the hill, there's a mountain. Over here, no, right? This is the lower area. So we determined, okay, it was in the morning. Does that match up? It did, right? And that brings us to chronolocation. What is chronolocation? So chronolocation is the name we use for determining the time and dates when something took place. There are several techniques that you can apply to establish time, right, and date. One is comparing shadow and position, the shadow position or length using Sunkalk, or you can compare satellite imagery from before and after, or other images or videos from before and after the event, if there are other images and videos available from that same area. So in the next video, I'll show you how you can do this with free satellite imagery from Sentinel Hub. So Sentinel Hub is a website, I think it's also in the tip sheet. They provide lower resolution imagery, right? So here, I'll talk you through a little bit. I'll explain what I was doing, right? So now I'm going to Sentinel Hub, so your browser. You've got the link, and then I'm pasting the location, the coordinates. I want to zoom in, right, to see it better. Those are the coordinates for that exact school. And then I'm selecting the dates, right? I want from before February 9th until after, and then compare and see if indeed the school burned down. Because in the video, we see the roof burned down, right? So here I'm selecting from before, this is the 5th. And then next, there you see the building, right? So I hit there, compare. And this is from after, the 10th. It's a little bit cloudy, right? So it might be difficult to see it. So I also selected from the 15th. And now I'm going to compare it, right? So here, this is the 15th. You see that the building over there, like the roof was really dark. And before the 9th, it was, well, kind of silver or whitish, right? From the material that reflects the sun. That wasn't the case afterwards. So that kind of confirmed this was the location, but also that it did indeed happen most likely on the 9th, right? Because we have images from before and images from right after the 9th confirming this hypothesis, right? So there were also several other videos uploaded from around that date. One from much later showing local, let's call it, it's kind of like a mayor. It's called a DO. It's like the local head of that division, right? So he was blaming some of the locals for what happened, right? He said he blamed them for selling fuel to separatist fighters. So we know that this is from around the same time, also because we see the same people in different videos, right? So here you have this guy who I guess is like a priest or something, right? Monk. And over here, we have like the same people standing in the same constellation. So that's another way to tell, right? Also, the positioning of the shadows is correspond to what we saw in the different video. All right. Now that I talked a little bit about this arson attack, I wanted to talk about two other videos. One is about, well, they are both actually about politicizing school children. So on different occasions, we were able to verify videos showing how school children and the school curricula are being politicized by both parties. So on Amazonian Independence Day, right, on October 1st, that was like last year, children were made to march in separatist held areas. On Cameroonian national holidays, on the other hand, children often participate in those patriotic events that are kind of similar in nature, especially in that politicized area. And then we also analyzed those so-called community schools. So in separatist held areas, some leaders try to start community schools. What that means is those are schools that the separatists are starting in their held territories. And they have a more pro-Ambazonian, pro-Anglophone curriculum, right? So that's also something we wanted to check, because that's also something reaffirming how this how school life, right, is being politicized, and yeah, the going to school of children as well. So first, starting with this Ambazonian Independence Day. So every year on October 1st, there is this Ambazonian Independence Day. Amazonia is the name they give to those Anglophone areas of Cameroon. So Ambazonian rebels celebrate independence with marches. Frequently, children also participate in them. We analyzed a case that took place in a town called Yellum, Northwest region. I will play this short video, and you will see he says, the guy narrating the video, the guy who filmed the video, he says a few things that sparked our attention and helped us verify the video.
Community schools in Bui subdivisions, Bui State, under the Supreme General of ADF, General Hassan. You can see the joy of the civilians. You can see the little children. You can see their madam trying to control them. So this is the beginning of something. 1st October 2020, celebrated at Banten under the Supreme General of ADF, General Hassan of Yellum. We give thanks to Egg of Sea family. We give thanks to the Egg of Sea family and the supporters of it.
That was almost the end. So I think we heard most of the important things. So first of all, he's mentioning the Bui subdivision. That's something similar to Nakambe, but it's like one level higher. So it's a bit of a bigger area. And then he's talking about the Supreme General of the ADF, so Ambazonian Defense Forces, General Hassan of Yellum. Yellum is a small location in that subdivision, right? And General Hassan is like a now deceased, you know, general. They all call themselves either general or colonel or commander of this separatist group, right? Yellum is also written on one of the banners held by a child, right? So this happened on October the 1st, 2020. So we can, again, we have dates, so we can also use the shadows again to place this somewhere and also exclude some matches, right? And then there are a few other things that the guy mentioned. For example, this was celebrated at Banten, right? And we see a lot of women and also some girls wearing a hijab, pointing like to a particular area of the Northwest regions with a higher number of Muslims, right? All right, so actually, where is Bui? So again, if you try to look for it on Google Earth, it will just point you to the kind of the middle, the center of that area, which isn't all that helpful because this didn't happen right in the center, right? Nor in the capital of this subdivision, Kumbo, but like in the outskirts, right? Like in rural areas. So this isn't very helpful. So again, like I decided to import these boundaries. Now I needed level 2 boundaries. So you have like different types of boundaries. You have like communes or districts, then you have departments, and then you have regions. So the regions can be the Southwest region, the Northwest region, departments like Bui, right? And then you have like districts like Nakambe. So now I imported, instead of level 3 administrative boundaries, level 2. All right. Now, can you find Banten or Yellum, 2 villages mentioned in the video, on Google Maps or Earth? Probably not, right? Google Maps and Earth have an almost impeccable reputation in North America and most European countries, but that is not always the case in Africa, unfortunately. Lots of African satellite imagery is out of date, especially in rural areas, which was the case here, right? We wanted to check areas that are kind of rural. Many villages aren't marked or have an unusual spelling or are just marked like wrongly, right? So where is actually Banten? Actually, if you look for Banten on Google Maps, Google Earth, you will not find it. So that's why I also often use OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap lets people add names of places to a certain location themselves. It's kind of like a Wikipedia for maps, right? You also have Wikimapia, which is very similar. But I find that OpenStreetMap often has more correct data, where it's more curated. It looks a little bit better. So I often go there when something doesn't show up on Google Maps or Earth, right? And I try to find names of places there. Sometimes even there, you won't find the name of a place or where it's located. So you might have to look at some old colonial maps, etc. But I won't go very deep into that right now. Yeah. Now, I mentioned something about towns being misspelled or having a slightly different name, yeah, because the transliteration didn't really work correctly, or yeah, they wrote it phonetically, or yeah, and so on. So what you would see on Google Earth for that same area, as I showed you here, is pretty much this. I zoomed in a little bit more. I want to focus on this alum. So what's alum, right? It was like phonetically similar to Yellum. So our working assumption was that the data that Google Earth pulled, right, from wherever it got their data, showed the town as being called Elm. So we assumed, okay, that's going to be Yellum, where this General Hassan from the ADF was from. We started looking in that area. And indeed, after a lot of like looking around, we found an area that seemed to match. But again, it took a whole lot of work, a lot of time to find it. One thing we also did was trying to find other videos from the same area. So this is in the middle, the video that we saw just now, right? And these two, again, like we created a panorama. It was my colleague who created it. We found this video from this General Hassan, Commander General Hassan from the ADF, Bui Brigade. And we see here, yeah, you can like complete the whole picture with this, right? We have like something that looks like a football pitch or something with some two houses, two buildings behind it and a little hill there, right? And here there is a structure that kind of looks like a stand. So also with Suncock, we can like kind of determine pretty much the direction in which this the camera was pointing, right? So the shadows at that date, because this is the 1st of October, they point in a northern direction. Yeah, this means the hills in the background are roughly south from the camera. This helps us when discarding locations in the general area, right? In the area around there. I can open this just so you have like a better look. So obviously this here is south, and you see that throughout the date, the shadow is this dark line there, yeah, is pointing mostly north, sometimes northwest, right, like in the morning, sometimes northeast in the afternoon, but also the shadows were pretty short, suggesting it was around noon. Yeah, you see here. Okay, so after a lot of work, a lot of like looking around that area, we finally found something. So this here, right, like Elm, that's one of the towns, right, that's mentioned in the video where this General Hassan is from. Banten, according to Wikimapia, is somewhere around that area. And in an area very, very close over here, we found a pitch, right, that matched, seemed to match. So here we see a pitch. we see these two buildings with a tree in front of it. And there is a structure that appears to be a stand as well, right? Where people were standing, watching the parade. And when comparing the area there, because in Google Maps, you also have a terrain view where you can see these 3D mountains and hills. This also seemed to match, right? So the mountain ridge is pretty similar. It might be a little bit deformed because not always, for some places, not always it's exactly the same. Can also be something with your computer, right? So not all computers, not all graphics cards are going to show them correctly. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the Batibo community schools. So rifts have opened between separatists over school resumption. Some separatist actors present themselves as supporters of education, but an Amazonian school system, right? So in Batibo, in August 2018, a video was shared in which young children sing the Amazonian anthem in Batibo. Narrator identifies himself as Commander Tiger. Yeah. This is a different ADF. So there are various Amazonian Defense Forces all over the Anglophone areas. In September 2018, Commander Tiger shared a video of community school in Batibo. By community school, they mean a school teaching an Amazonian curriculum to young children. So this is part of the video. He then enters this building where we see a lot of children sitting there studying, right? And we see here also a little bit of how the area looks like outside. He then turns also that way, so you see more, as you can see here. So again, we made like kind of a panorama of that area to have a better understanding of how it looks like. All right, so that video alone wasn't enough to verify it. Yeah, we decided we had to verify this video because it's a good example of how children are instrumentalized in the conflict. The video alone was not enough, as we said. For a proper geolocation, our colleague Carlos Gonzalez, who couldn't be here today, started verifying that other videos shared by Commander Tiger were filmed in and around Batibo. So rather than in the city itself, it was in the rural areas surrounding Batibo, where they have their stronghold. So this is a geolocation that he did. That was easier to do, right? Because it was at a well-known area where a lot of people pass. It's called the Guzang Market near Batibo. And that's much easier to spot, to geolocate. So here you see like the things he marked that match, right? I won't go too much into details here, but yeah, this was easier to spot. So sometimes geolocating other areas can help you. Here we see another example of a blockade. So they blocked a highway going into Batibo, right? So there they were like, I don't know, checking people passing by, seeing if they weren't government officials, maybe also asking for a toll or something like that, right? And here we see a building with a very unique roof, right? Which matched this one near like a way just outside of town. And here another one. Yeah, that also matched the position of the buildings also match. So all right. This was location 1, the Guzan market, and this is the location of the blockade. Yeah, this, as you might guess, right, this is eventually where we found the location, but it helped us determine we should look kind of around town, not necessarily inside. And it was not that far from where this blockade took place. So also, again, you can do the same. Actually, in the video, you hear some roosters in the background. And also the shadows seem to be a bit longer, suggesting it was in the morning. So that also helps you to make a picture in your head. Okay, this could be the place because the shadows are pointing in that direction, or not, right? Eventually, again, it might seem easy when I talk about this, but it takes a lot of time, right? After a lot of time, my colleague found this place that matched. So over here in red, we have this bush, this tree, right? This, I don't even know if that's like a bush or something else, right? But you can like see like I think it's a stack. You can see it on the ground there. And if you look closely, you can even see the shadow of this pole, right? And also the house, if you look closely, it has the same L shape, right? So that's where my colleague found the location. All right. So having talked about Cameroon, I want to let my colleague Jay Godin present the rest. The rest is going to be about Ethiopia. All right, Jake, I'll stop sharing and you can start sharing yourself.
Cool. Yeah, I'll switch over to my screen. All right. So with Tigray, it really, so for some just for some context on the Tigray situation, essentially there'd been this conflict between Ethiopia's government and a paramilitary force in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, which is in the north. And specifically the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is a kind of like a political party, and they have military wing as well. The Ethiopian government pretty quickly kind of took over a lot of the region of Tigray. They kind of entered the major cities and stuff and had control of the urban areas. Although the TPLF had kind of moved, sorry, the TPLF had kind of moved to more of a rural kind of like insurgency type thing. And it wasn't really a victory as the Ethiopian government had tried to claim, because of this, like there was still fighting ongoing, specifically in rural areas. But there was also a lack of communication access for a lot of the people in the region. Internet was kind of being stifled and not so easy to connect with, like with people posting on social media or something like that. So there was a lack of information coming out, like a lack of visual information coming out showing what was going on in the conflict, which we were reading a lot about, kind of like potential war crimes happening. And there were credible reports of, soldiers looting or soldiers like killing people like extrajudicially. So it was after that we essentially saw a video that came out, and it was of a massacre going on. And you see people in soldiers' uniforms kind of throwing bodies off the side of a cliff. It's pretty graphic, and it was shared within the like the Bellingcat Slack in the Africa channel that we have, and we all kind of at that point we started trying to figure out, okay, can we figure out where this was? Like, was it in Ethiopia actually? Because essentially this first post on social media from this Stalin account, who's like a local reporter within the region, that this was the first evidence, or the first time it was shared, and we decided to try and start looking into it. It was mainly myself, Giancarlo with Bellingcat, and then Alium, who was with BBC Africa Eye. We all kind of started looking into it separately, and then we decided that it was probably best to combine our forces. And so we started collaborating on Slack and on Signal in order to see if we could figure out exactly where this was. It was kind of nice to combine all three newsrooms, or the Bellingcat, Newsy, and BBC, because obviously BBC Africa Eye has a very good record on investigating this kind of stuff in Africa. And Giancarlo and I were, it was nice to collaborate with them. They also had, BBC Africa Eye has access to some resources that Bellingcat and Newsy don't necessarily have access to. But the first kind of clues that we had seen were within comments related to the video when it was released. There were people saying that it happened near Axum, And there were specifically people saying that it was happening near a town, a little village outside of Axum to the south called Mahaber Dago. And so the mapping is not quite as bad as Cameroon when it comes to like labels on rural areas and stuff, but the like map data available for rural Ethiopia, specifically rural Tigray, still isn't super great. So it took some searching around to find the exact spot. In fact, we were kind of, there was a similarly named town not too far away called like Mahaber Dwega, and we kind of thought it was near there because it was still kind of closest to Axum, but it was to the further south. But the terrain didn't really match up. And so while we had started searching around there to begin with, we eventually moved our search to the south in order to, or it moved our search closer to Axum in order to kind of match the terrain, which is one of the main things that kind of helped us out here. There were other videos that were released. They all kind of looked like they were in a similar location, but it was kind of hard to get an exact read on, okay, were they in fact the same spots? This first one here was like a kind of a further out. So it actually gave you a really good view of the like ridge line around the area, which was extremely helpful when it came to geolocating this. It also gave you an idea of what kind of terrain we're looking at here, which is like a sort of step situation where it's these plateaus with large cliff edges and kind of like these rifts or valleys in the middle. The second video was another kind of a close-up of the situation, what was going on the cliffside. Soldiers throwing bodies, shooting at people as they were walking towards the cliff, as they were walking them towards the cliff. The third video was a little bit more difficult because it wasn't you couldn't actually see the cliff. It was more of a, it had these people sitting on the ground facing what looks like kind of like a small ridge line, like a shorter ridge line, not quite the same plateau situation we'd seen in the other videos. And then the fourth video, the next video, which I guess the fifth video, was actually, it looks like it was on top of the, maybe up on top of the ridge line or something. And, but also it was quite a bit different than the other locations. So while looking through these videos, we were looking for clues that would help us with this geolocation. And a lot of that came down to the cliff ridge line, the shadows from the individuals seen in the videos, and the mountains in the background. And with these clues, you could kind of start getting an idea of where to look. With the like what I was saying with the terrain, you kind of it allows you to kind of like look using Google Earth and say, okay, well, this whole region is kind of a plateau looking region. So let's look there. Let's not look over here where there's a lot of mountains, but they're not necessarily these steep drop-offs. They're more of like your what you would think as a mountain. So, and then the shadows also really helped here, because in the videos, you can see that they are elongated and they're kind of almost perpendicular to the ridge line. And so with how the sun works and giving off shadows, you can tell that either the sun was very low in the east or west horizon. It was either setting or it was rising. And that is what it would take to kind of cast these long shadows. But we also know, since it was somewhat perpendicular to the ridge line, that the ridge line must run either north to south or south to north. And so that kind of gives you a place to start looking on Google Earth, because if you're looking along a kind of a plateau region or any ridge lines, and you're trying to find a specific one where this may have happened, you can at least rule out the ones that are running east to west, because it doesn't match up with how the shadows are. So this is kind of an example from Giancarlo, what his Google Earth kind of looked like. Essentially, he set it up to be a region south of south of Axum. And then he initially with the green rectangle, and then the red annotations here show the plateaus that are kind of like the plateaus we had to choose from. if we were going to try and search around the region and kind of match up the terrain. Because if you're looking, and I can kind of show this with, let's see, with Google or in my Google Earth. Let's see. You can see that I have a lot of Google Earth is essentially one of your Google Earth should be used as almost a notepad when it comes to geolocation. You should mark down sites that you've checked, and you should mark down sites that seem like potential matches. And what's great is that you can use the drawing tool to draw whatever you want. You can make large circles in order to like set a perimeter. And then you can also set down pins to like show areas that you've already searched. The nice thing, and this is something that Giancarlo had pointed out with kind of his green rectangle, is if you're searching specifically like very close to the ground in order to get an idea of where things are at, and you eventually run into your perimeter, you can kind of say, okay, maybe I've looked too far. And in order to give you an idea of what I was talking about with the plateau situation, you can see that this area, like if you were to search around Axum, which is right up here, if you were to search around Axum, you can rule out some areas just based off of how the terrain looks. Another really nice thing about Google Earth is that you can turn on the terrain representation so that you can get a better idea of the geography of the region. So when you're looking around, you want to find these kind of plateaus that have the steep ridge line and kind of like flat tops. And Google Earth can kind of help give you that idea of where to look. So these plateaus, it's relatively flat on the top, and then it cuts down pretty sharply into these valleys. It's not the best representation because Google Earth kind of does an approximate terrain build out, so it's not going to show you like a steep, cliff face, but it will give you, when you spend a lot of time looking at Google Earth, especially the terrain, you can kind of tell, given the shadows in sat imagery, kind of where you have these steep drop-offs. Like this dark shadow shown here shows that this is a pretty harsh ridgeline going on here. And then it does turn into more of a gradual valley. But yeah, it also gives you an idea that, okay, there are two ridgelines here. There's a kind of a secondary upper ridgeline. And that's kind of what we were looking for in those videos, where you get this ridgeline that you see in the background. It's more of like this is a smaller like secondary one. And so having kind of taken that into account, Alium, myself, and Giancarlo started kind of scouring these ridge lines, specifically near what we found to be was the village of Mahavaradego. We found this using it's not showing up on it wasn't showing up on Google Maps as an accurate, like it wasn't saying that this was the city, but another website, Wikimapia, which is more of like a annotated site that it allows people to kind of like put their own little annotations on it to label certain cities or places within cities or military bases. It's an extremely useful website, and that had labeled this as Mahavaradego. So we were able to find it that way. So once we had the kind of like the city to look around that people had claimed it happened nearby, we started looking at ridgelines. And as I had said with the shadows, you can kind of rule out these east to west ridgelines because it wouldn't really work with how the shadows are working. But so we started looking at these north to south ones. Oh, thanks, Youri, for sending that link. So we tried a few sites. We were in communication with each other, which was nice because especially if you get an idea of where one site, like something that might be a potential site, it's really very useful to double check with colleagues. just to see what they think in terms of how it checks out. I had essentially landed on this cliff face around here. I had tried looking at it in Google Earth, and it kind of started matching up with what I thought to be what I thought could work. There were a few things that kind of led me to this. Based off of the imagery, I figured there was probably a road nearby. I kind of was thinking this just in general, because I don't know how far they would have to have walked these people into a rural area. I imagine they had them on a truck or a vehicle, or they had them walk down a path from a city, the nearby city, and then committed this massacre. But so I kind of was looking for places that were near roads. Obviously, the ridgeline was important here. There's a lot in the videos. You can see that there's a lot of trees or foliage on like the cliffside or off the cliff into the valley. So that was important. There was also this little ravine, which is visible in one of the videos. I forget which one it was. I think it's maybe this one. Nope. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but there's like a bit of this ravine going through part of the background, and that I looked at it, and it didn't totally match up, but it kind of, that was something to look out for as well when considering sites. And then I tried to get an idea of the topography, like the mountains in the background. And it was kind of difficult because, as I said, Google Earth's not like a perfect representation of elevation and whatnot. It kind of curves things. So it kind of obscures what might be like what should be a more visible kind of ridge silhouette. Kind of seen here, it's hard to see what it's hard to make out how the background ridge lines actually look. So let me get back to my slides here actually. So this is just a screenshot from my Google Earth. Just to reiterate, Google Earth is an excellent, it's the tool for geolocation. It's not the only one, but it's like the bread and butter. And it's also extremely useful as essentially a notepad that you can put down all your notes on and figure out, okay, I've checked here, this is a potential site. And all you have to do is just put down pins. The nice thing is, you have all those pins there, and then if you want to go back and double check and or like revisit memories of geolocation, you can go back and do exactly that. I also, similar to what Youri had pointed out, sketching is a really good idea to kind of give you a better idea of, better contextualize the environment. You don't have to be you don't have to be an artist to do it. You just have to kind of write sketch out what you think could be a potential setup for the environment around wherever you're trying to search. It kind of makes it easier when you're looking on Google Earth to spot things. So like I noticed, as I said, the trees on the cliffside, I noticed that there was like this secondary ridge. I noticed that we were looking for a plateau of some sort. So I tried sketching this out in like kind of a doodle and kind of put a direction that I would be searching. And I think it really helps. It's like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something that kind of gives you a good layout to kind of look for. It really helps with buildings as well. This was more of an environmental, like mountain ridgeline type situation. But if you're looking for a specific, or you're trying to geolocate something within a city, sketching out where the street is going and where the buildings are and related to the street in relation to the street can really expedite like a geolocation search, especially if you know what city you're looking in. So Peak Visor ended up being extremely helpful here within this geolocation, and this was the first time I actually used it. There's a couple things to note here. Once again, scanning these videos for ridge lines was very important. one of the videos, I believe it was this one. It was a single frame. So videos, when you're scanning videos for geolocation clues, every frame can count. This video, if you just watch it, it doesn't, you can easily miss. It doesn't show much of a ridgeline. It shows the background, it shows the valley, which is useful, but it doesn't show, like, you don't get a great wide shot of what the background looks like, except for in a few frames in the very beginning, you can see that the camera moves and you can see the background pretty clearly right here. And this is the background. This is what we're looking for. This is what we needed to see in order to get a good idea of where to look. Some of the other videos do show really good background details, but this one proved to be very useful, at least in my search. And I'll show you that with Peak Visor. So Peak Visor here, sorry, I was looking at the chat again. Peak Visor is a site that allows you, it's meant for recreational use. It's meant for people who go hiking to, if they took a picture of a mountain to get a better idea of what that mountain was, they can use, it will allow you to search using the coordinates of wherever you're at, and then you can just look around and see what the mountains look like. In this case, after getting an idea of where I thought things were at, based off of a lot of the clues that we had, I decided to look in Peak Visor. And looking at Peak Visor, it kind of hashes out the terrain topography in a more helpful manner than Google Earth does. Google Earth has so much information that it kind of drowns out like the very basics that you would need for this geolocation, which is the ridgeline. Peak Visor is just that, just the ridgeline, just the elevation profile of what we're looking for. So I'd seen this specific spot and I thought, okay, that looks a lot like what I'm looking for. One useful thing that Peak Visor allows you to do is to import photos. So you can import a photo and try to match it up. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do this. It also will try and scan your photo for coordinates. This is a screenshot from a video that was uploaded on social media. So there's no metadata to show the coordinates, which is unfortunate. But if you take this photo and you can essentially rotate the mountains in the background and see how it fits. The thing is, you don't want to alter the photo at all, because that would kind of change the like how things would fit. If you like squeeze the photo, or like, you know, you just want to change, you can change its size, but you can't really do much more alterations to it. Otherwise you won't get a very accurate, it won't provide an accurate profile. But this photo ended up matching exactly with the mountains in the background. You can see that there's the kind of like ridge line here on the that kind of comes out. I can show you in Google Earth here in a second. But more importantly, this like large plateau in the background fits right up with the image, the single frame, or the few frames from that that one video. And so after doing this, we had a pretty good idea that we had the right spot. I'll show you in Google Earth. So this ridge line right here kind of wraps around, and that's what we're seeing right here. Once again, Google Earth doesn't give you a perfect picture. It doesn't look like that's how it should look. And then there's also this like plateau in the background doesn't exactly look like it should, like a flat plateau like that. And indeed, if you look in Peak Visor, you can see that there is some like other kind of terrain going on here. But when you're looking at it in a silhouette with the sun in a way that kind of darkens it all, it ends up matching up, which is great. And that really helped out. We were able to essentially find the, that we kind of were able to confirm that. And the other 3 of the other videos. We were like, okay, these are all happened at this cliff top. There was the 5th video. I can show you that actually in Peak Visor as well. The 5th video that was taken elsewhere was actually, that took another, once again, Peak Visor helped us out with that. And it ended up being kind of about less a kilometer away. But there's a single frame in it that allows you to identify background mountains. And there's like a single, just a very quick, like, set of frames that allow you to see the background in a way that you can line up in Peak Visor and match everything up. It's not perfect, but the main thing here that you can see is that this small mountain here and this plateau end up matching up. You can kind of make stitchings to stitch together a kind of a better panoramic of the background to see like a wider ridgeline. I think we ended up doing that as well, but for the most part, you can match these up and you get a good idea that that video was most likely shot kind of about a kilometer away. And I can show you on Google Earth. So it ended up being right up here. And so I had essentially been searching around for that last video using Peak Visor in different spots, trying to get an idea. I didn't have the best idea of how the ridgeline matched up because we didn't have like the shadows from the zoomed out video that we did with the other site. But eventually I kind of stumbled upon that and was able to confirm it using Peak Visor, which was great. There was another part of this video that we wanted to, so geolocation was very important. It kind of helped us figure out the where and verify the where, but we needed to figure out the who, and that was a little bit more tricky because these uniforms weren't exactly, I mean, the fatigues matched up with like social media posts showing Ethiopian National Defense Forces. But we still needed to kind of verify, like get a better verification, because fatigues obviously are pretty important, pretty unique to militaries, but they're not like an end all be all, because there were claims that these people were just Tigray rebels that had stolen uniforms, and we'll get to that in a second. But one thing that we did notice, once again, in like one of the like a small amount of frames in the video that's a kilometer away from the Cliffside massacre, is that one of the soldiers does indeed have Ethiopian patch on his arm. You can match that up with open source visuals. This image here on the right is from Facebook. The Ethiopian National Defense Forces, or the Ethiopian military, their government has a Facebook page, and they post images all the time showing their soldiers like fighting the good fight and relaxing or whatever, doing military related shenanigans. And that if you just troll through the images and try and see, it will give you an idea of what their military, how they look, what they're wearing. And it just is in this image on the right, not everybody has shoulder patches. And not everybody even has matching fatigues. This guy in the foreground here has older pattern fatigues. Giancarlo and I had kind of looked into the fatigues and realized that it was kind of a relatively new switch over to this like digicam type situation, as opposed to the more patterned or big fat patterned camouflage that they had previously. So this was very useful. There's also another video in one of the other videos, not that one, this one, you get a kind of a close shot of one of the soldiers as he walks up to the cameraman. And there is it's kind of hard to see, but as you can see this black bar here, the quality it leaves a lot to be desired, but this is another aspect of an Ethiopian military uniform that matches up, and that's it just says Ethiopian Army here. CNN actually had a pretty good example here for their story, and you can kind of see it here where it's not legible, but it still matches up with the pattern on Ethiopian military uniforms, where it's a kind of a black barred or black boxed label that says Ethiopian Army. And once again, they also showed the same flag patch situation. So that really kind of gives us an idea. Yes, these guys are probably, probably Ethiopian military. It's that video, as I was saying, was shot about 1 kilometer away. And in fact, there's actually somebody, I don't have a screenshot of it. I guess I can show you or try and show you, but there is an individual who kind of, this person in the white kind of matches up with somebody else who's being walked towards one of the cliff faces. One of the things that would have been a very good find is if a lot of these people matched up with a lot of people on the cliffside. That wasn't quite the case. And also the lighting in this video doesn't exactly make it easy to match up everybody. So that was a little bit of a, that made things kind of difficult, but this guy with the like traditional white shawl over his head does appear in, I think it's, this video. He's can be seen being walked towards the cliff face here. And it's kind of this, all this stuff is kind of leading to like, okay, it's giving us a better picture. It's not like smoking, quite a smoking gun, but it kind of helps clarify things. There was another thing that we looked into for this investigation to get a better idea of who was what the soldiers were saying. And because there was some chatter going on in each of the videos. One thing that the soldiers talk about when they're walking people up to the cliffside is they're calling them Oyane. And that is a term that refers to, essentially refers to Tigrayan people, or like Tigrayan rebels. It's a term that's got some history. Tigrayans can use the term like kind of with reverence. They are, it's kind of a good thing to be called that by each other. In this case, the soldiers were calling them it in a way, like a derisive way. And we had worked with a translator to kind of get clarification on what exactly was being said. And we also spoke with an expert at International Crisis Group who was able to give us some context on the term Oyane as well. So that was super helpful. But that also gave us, once again, that kind of added to the context of like, okay, who are these people? Like, who are these people who are killing these people on this cliffside? The translator helped us. It also gave us an idea of the dialect. It was not, obviously they're speaking Amharic. They were not speaking Tigrinya. They're the language of Tigray. So we knew that they weren't, they most likely weren't from the Tigray region. So a lot of the claims that, oh yes, these were Tigrayan rebels who's dressed up in Ethiopian military fatigues, which is a claim that comes with any massacre. Government will always say, oh no, this is false flag. These are bad actors. They took our uniforms. It may look like it's our guys, but it's the bad guys. So that was, this was another piece of context that helped us. There was also, we were able to get some satellite imagery working with BBC, which was great. And this is that area in January, and it shows military vehicles. It shows specifically a military convoy and artillery that was set up. And so that was useful in context as well, because BBC, who'd spoken to people on the ground, or spoken to at least a couple people on the ground, were told that this happened in January, and we can see that there was a military convoy there in January. We don't know if this was a TPLF military convoy, but it's likely with the control that the government had in the region that a convoy like this wouldn't have been able to be set up especially with this kind of like artillery. But once again, it's not like a clear smoking gun. There's not like a big Ethiopian flag you can see here, but it does help once again give you context on who was likely responsible here. And that I think that's the end of my slides here. I think, yeah, I pretty much showed the Peak Visor ended up being an extremely helpful tool that I've seen people start using more and more in Afghanistan and Syria and elsewhere. Obviously, you need some mountains to work with in order for it to be effective, but mountains that it can help you confirm your geolocation with.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, and for keeping to time. As we come to the panelist questions, I have a question quite quickly, which is, how can the average African newsroom who has some experience in technology, but not too much, start using these tools, for example, to map artisanal mining in South Sudan, or to look at drug trafficking networks, or even transshipment of logs in ports? How could the newsroom use this? I know Bellingcat has a great toolkit that has a dozen different tabs, including on things. We just published a story now, and one of the key things was removing the metadata to protect the source. So could you tell us more about your toolkit, and then how journalists could use geolocation and chronolocation in their newsrooms, which may or may not have the expertise? Does Bellingcat also provide free training to these newsrooms?
You want to take that, Youri?
Yeah, sorry, my mouse is a little bit like rusty here. Yeah, so I think a lot of those tools can easily be used, can easily be used by people in Africa on a budget, right? Because most of the tools that we mentioned are free. Some, like you need to have a little budget, but often aren't too expensive. I talked about Sentinel Hub, right? Earlier on, that one is free. Now there is like the only caveat there is that it's like lower resolution. So this one is 10 meters per pixel. What you are used to see on Google Earth, I don't know if you guys had the time to look around, check the satellite imagery on Google Earth, but what you have there is usually 0.5 meter resolution. So there is like quite a big difference. Yet, when you're looking at like big things like mining on a bigger scale, right, or like deforestation, things that are on a bigger scale, this is going to help you a lot, right? Even if it's like low resolution, these things will be visible from satellite and also on lower resolution satellite imagery. Now there is one caveat. If you're looking at this in a very tropical area, then you will have problems with clouds. So sometimes clouds might be blocking the view for you. So that's that. Yeah, for training, Bellingcat does provide training, but like usually for people who are in Western countries, it's how to say, it's paid, because that's how we keep ourselves alive, right? For African journalists, we have been like doing some trainings for them for free, but usually like people we already knew. I don't think we have like a formalized process to like apply for it, but yeah, I will talk with my colleagues. See, yeah, we are still going to provide those in the next few months, so maybe that's something we can do, like communicate that better. So that's, I think, all the questions that you were asking. There was something else, wasn't it? So the toolkit, right? The question about the trainings. Again, like most of the stuff that we talked about today, if not all, was were free tools. So yeah.
I'll add. So on my end, I work in a newsroom, so it's more of a journalist side of things. I mean, Bellingcat obviously does work that's similar to what a journalist would do. But from like a newsroom perspective, I think it's useful if you have somebody in the newsroom who can get kind of spend some time learning how to geolocate or learning how to use these tools. It doesn't need to be everybody. I'm pretty much the only one in my newsroom who does a lot of this stuff, but the partnership with Bellingcat allows us to kind of expand that open source knowledge. But and other newsrooms are building entire like teams based off of this kind of visual forensics type stuff. But it only really takes one person who's interested in this to kind of get an idea on how to use these tools. Like Youri was saying with like mining and stuff, like sat imagery is generally freely available, but there are paid programs like Planet Labs who they sometimes will work with journalism outlets in order to work on stories, but I don't have a ton of specifics on that because Newsy doesn't have a partnership with Planet.
Yeah. So like that's what Bellingcat has, right? Like Bellingcat does have a partnership with Planet, so we are able to look up some satellite imagery. I think also on our Twitter, we were talking a little bit about that there. I don't know all the specific details because it's more my colleague who's dealing with that. There are others though, right? Like there's Maxer, Digital Globe. Some of them, if you reach out to them, they might be able to provide some imagery for free, although sometimes it could take a while for them to get back to you. And then there are like other sites, right? Like those aren't the satellite imagery providers themselves, but kind of like distributors in this market that sell satellite imagery from different providers, like Apollo mapping. And I mean, like you can always get in touch. Let me place this here in the chat. 1 second. So you can always get in touch with them and ask them for like a price quotation. What else? Yeah, there is Airbus, and actually, like you probably could make an account on their website and see how much it costs for like I don't know. I think the minimum is like 25 square kilometers for a satellite imagery. See how much that costs. So there are some options there, but again, like you should check whether what you need is going to require like very high resolution satellite imagery, or if low resolution will do just fine. If so, then Sentinel Hub will be of use to you.
Thanks, Youri and Jake, for a fascinating session. I'm popping up here. My name is Isaac Minnaar. Khadija's line dropped, so I'm just taking over. This was really, really good. One of our top master classes for this conference. If anybody wants to watch again, if you missed, or if you want to share it with friends, it will be up on the African Investigative Journalism Conference YouTube channel a little later today, where you can also watch all the master classes. I also want to tell you about the next session, which is by a New York Times team on a story that they've done a visual investigation in Mozambique. So don't miss that. It's starting at 4:30 or in 20 minutes time. As well as some of the training sessions that we have in the next 2 days. So that include all kinds of training by experts on data storytelling, on OSINT tools, social media tools for investigations, also the Aleph data repository, specifically with material that can be used by African stories. Go to the WOVA program or the program on the AIJC website, which is AIJC Africa, and you can find the full program there. So thank you very much, both colleagues from Bellingcat, and we will probably see you at the next conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.